All right, Chuck, so let's jump straight in. Let me ask you this. What is the number one mistake that you see entrepreneurs or business owners making as it relates to their team or building their culture?
Yeah, great question. Very simple. The number one mistake they make is they tell. Managers tell, leaders ask. And when you tell, you dehumanize, you demotivate, you separate yourself, and you wonder why nobody's with you. It's because you told instead of asked. So fundamental number one, people are managing instead of leading, and the two are radically different. We should not manage, we should always lead. Let's ask.
Simple and so profound. But let me first introduce you to everyone that's watching and listening to this. So today we have the privilege and the honor of speaking with Chuck Blakeman. He's the founder of Crankset Group. He personally has built several businesses, anywhere ranging from $10 million to $100 million. He works with clients from around the world, helping them scale and grow their businesses. But more importantly, build cultures and build teams that actually enjoy getting up, enjoy coming to work, and are all heading in the same direction. So Chuck, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be with us.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. This is what juices me up.
Well, let's return back to that first answer. So leaders ask, managers tell. Let's talk a little bit about that. It sounds so simple, and yet we know it's very difficult to actually live that out. Give us some case studies here on how we go about doing that.
Yeah, sure. It's hard for all of us because everything we don't like about the way work is organized comes from the industrial age factory system. So you can just look at the way we ran factories and realize this is the fundamental problem in business today, is that we actually think we left the industrial age in the 1970s. Only the back office left the industrial age in the 1970s. The front office is still full of guys in ties telling people what to do in a top-down hierarchy that I affectionately call a pyramid scheme. Because pyramid schemes are put together to benefit the people at the top by using the people at the bottom. That's exactly what work is done. And so management is about using power and control and authority to manage people and to control them for the benefit of the managed. I don't want to be part of that, but that's the norm in business. Leadership is about me actually serving other people and figuring out how do I elevate them and help them make meaning at work and figure out what do they need and how can I help them get where they need to go.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Robert Greenleaf in his work on servant leadership. Yeah. You familiar with that?
Yes.
And is that kind of in line with what you're talking about? That
it's even more than that, Wayne. It's ironically, servant leadership is like saying when you see a flat surface with legs on it, you call it a table. When you really shouldn't have to, but because the first word table doesn't mean table anymore, you have to say table again. Leadership in the ancient, you look in the Greek, the Chinese, the Hebrew, and a lot of other places, leadership, the leader actually means servant. And many of the ancient Chinese philosophies on servanthood is basically the servant eats last, the leader eats last, and they're there to serve other people. That's leadership. Leadership is there to use whatever power and authority you might have to get other people to the point where they don't need you. And managers are just the opposite. Managers never get out of the way. Managers tell and are always in the way. Leaders ask, and they train by asking, and they ask people, what do you need? How can I help you? Where do you need to go next? What do you think our objective should be? And they get those people set up so that they don't need the leader anymore. That's servant leadership, and it really just should be called leadership. But we don't anymore because, to your point and to his point, we've conflated leadership with management to the point we don't actually know there's a difference. They have nothing in common, and leadership is a great thing, and management of people should just go away. It's not only a net zero, it's unhelpful.
Yeah, where do you think we lost our way? I mean, how did we end up in the situation where we do have to define leadership by adding the word servant in front of it? How did we lose our way?
I mean, there's all kinds of things that go into this. The need for power, the need for control, the need for my own security. I'd rather rely on my own decisions than somebody else's. But where we actually went astray is that we took management out of slavery and put it in business. The first mention of management is in Hammurabi's code about 5,000 years ago, and he mentions the need to manage slaves. Well, if someone doesn't want to work, Wayne, if they don't want to be there, the only option you have is to stand over them with a whip to make them work. And thus management was born. Management went from slavery to serfdom into the military, and then we borrowed that same top-down pyramid scheme from the military, brought it into work, and it works. And it works, but does it work the best? That's the question. And the answer is no. All the data, you look at companies that don't have managers, and there's hundreds of large ones and thousands of small ones that do not have managers, no bosses, no imposed hierarchy. They live on distributed decision-making teams, and they all live at the top of their professions and industries, faster growth, higher profits, exponentially lower turnover. Wegmans Groceries, 35% turnover in the grocery industry. Theirs is 2 to 3% a year. And they live on teams without bosses. It's just one example.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know some people watching or listening to this are thinking, when you start talking about leadership in its true sense, in other words, we are to serve those that are part of our team. For some entrepreneurs, that may kind of rub them the wrong way. They think, I started this thing. It's right. It's my baby. It's my business. I'm growing it. So how do you convince an entrepreneur who maybe grew up with this mentality that, management and leadership are so that the people on the team serve those that are above them? How do you begin the conversation? How do you begin that dialogue to shift that thinking?
We redirect their ego. Because my ego most of the time is built just around that. Hey, I started this darn thing and it's my baby, and you're not going to dress my baby, let alone take him for a walk. And, I'm never letting my baby out of my sight, and I'm making all the decisions for my baby. And that's how I find value in the world around me. I am indispensable. What a dumb way to do business. If you really think about it, is that really something to be proud of, that you are indispensable? I don't think Richard Branson suffers from that. The dude lives on an island and has 460 businesses, and I think he takes pride in the fact that he's dispensable. So my first book, Making Money is Killing Your Business, was about this journey of getting people off the treadmill, getting them to understand that the guy who really that really has the bull by the horns is the woman or the guy who doesn't have to be there. I had a guy call me after reading that book a few years ago, and he says, I'm a consultant. I do $1 million a year in business, and I'm on the treadmill. I need some help. And I said, well, when would you like to meet? And he says, when are you available? And I said, well, all day Mondays, any day Friday, the last week of any month, and usually in most afternoons. And he said, you son of a bitch. And I was making a point to him, because I said, pick your time. I'm free. My organization runs without me. And he said, that's exactly why I need you, because I used to think that was the right thing for me to be indispensable. And I said, yeah, I'll be in Italy for a month coming up here. And if you want to figure that out. Now the guy works about 2 days a week and has 1/10 of the clients he used to have. And he's gone from 1 million to 25 million. Wow. So we got to redirect our ego and realize that the woman who doesn't have to be there, they're the ones who have really figured this out. And that's a start. That's the place to start, is I am not that important. Somehow Charles Schwab found somebody else who could trade stocks. Mrs. Fields found somebody else who could make cookies. You can find somebody who does what you do.
Yeah. And again, I think we are often in business our own worst enemies, right? Oh. It goes back to, the person in the mirror we think is the most valuable team player on the team. And if we're not there, it's going to fall apart. Yeah. But what are some practical, tactical things that can be put in place to begin making that transition? So yeah. I hear what you're saying, Chuck. There's glimmers of hope in that, right? So somebody listening, they're thinking, it sounds good, but how do I go from where I'm at today, right? Which is everything dependent on me.
Yeah, it's a great question. My second book missed the mark on that, partially because I can't put everything in one book. My second book was called Why Employees Are Always a Bad Idea. And we want stakeholders instead of employees. And the premise of that book was basically to teach us what we inherited from the military and from the factories should be done away with. We need to move away from the industrial age into the participation age. So that book was the who, what, when, where, and why of the participation age. My book that's coming out November 17th, Re-Human-izing the Workplace by Giving Everybody Their Brain Back, that is the how. So the question you ask is exactly the right one. How do we do this? Okay, great. I get that I shouldn't have a fancy top-down imposed hierarchy. Well, how do I get from where I am to where we are? So we've done this with many companies. We just finished doing it with a $300 million company in California that was a top-down company, and they've switched from that to no bosses and no hierarchy. One guy quit, and the rest of them all got repurposed into things they're happier doing. So there's 12, we call it the 12 tools of distributed decision making. And tool number one is basically the idea of what we call the mission-centered organization. Imagine this scenario, Wayne, you and I are employees or stakeholders in a business, and the CEO gets the 150 of us together and says, okay, here's the deal. I used to be your boss, and you used to all have, every seventh one of you was a boss. We are now all firing ourselves from being your boss. We're rehiring ourselves as leaders, and we'll explain that to you later, but it's going to be a very different relationship. We ain't going to tell you what to do, buddy. We are now going to reinstitute one boss and one boss only, and he holds up the mission statement. Mm. And the mission statement in any good organization, the mission statement is about what result, what is the biggest, best result we can get for our client? What is that? That's what we are all about. So he holds up the mission statement and says, this is our mission, and this is now my boss, this is now your boss, and if you ever see me doing anything that flies in the face of the boss, you have the right and the responsibility to call me on it, and I want the same right and responsibility with you. You do that, and I've seen it happen, and it just levels the playing field all at once. All of a sudden, now we are all working for one thing together. It's not about my department is better than your department, creating little fiefdoms with moats around them to protect our budget. We only have one mission. Technology does not exist to help the technology department. It only exists to serve the mission. Sales, marketing, accounting. They exist for one purpose only. So you make that statement to begin with, and you dismantle the whole association of bosses with people, and you make it the mission. And now we are all going to grade each other on how we are doing relative to the mission. And we will hire and we will fire relative to that statement.
Wow, yeah, that's
the
powerful.
place to start.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One thing about that I kind of hear and pick up on is it goes back to, though, what you said earlier in our conversation about ego. It takes you getting rid of that ego to be able to stand up and allow people who used to be quote unquote subordinates to you to now have the authority and the permission to question you as what, the CEO, whatever that title may have been. So one, like you said, it's about removing that ego, getting that ego out of the way and saying we're all here serving the same thing, which is the mission where we're heading. Yeah. But before we keep diving into that, I want to jump back to a word you used earlier. You mentioned the words participation age.
Yeah.
Could you expound on that a little bit and clarify what that is?
Yeah, I didn't make this up. We were, one of my 12 companies was a marketing agency, and we went to California to get an award from what was then Sun Microsystems back in 2006 as the marketing partner of the year worldwide for them. Very big honor. There was like 6 of us in the little marketing agency. And while I was there at this little conference, this little two-day Sun Microsystems internal conference, there was a guy there from Wired, and he was talking about this thing called the participation age. And it was riveting to me. And I thought that's really where we are. We always, I'm always trying to rehumanize the workplace, which is why this next book is called that. And you think about how we've named every age. From the Stone Age on through, it's always about some implement or something. Why do we do that? The Industrial Age, the Technology Age, the Information Age, the Stone Age, the Bronze, it's always about something. What if we named it after people? And the participation age really rung with me on that because it's really where we're going as a society. There's 2 hallmarks of the participation age. Very simply, participation and sharing. People want to participate in today's world. People want to participate in building a great company, not for you, but with you. And they want to share in the rewards of that. They want to be capitalists too. If I create a lot of value in this company, I don't expect to get a 2.3% pay raise. I expect to get, what you're going to get. That's why this is a pyramid scheme, because it's using people at the bottom for the benefit of the people at the top. Well, what if everybody benefited? What if the guy who created the sticky note at 3M actually got what he was worth? I think he probably got a kudos and a gift card. And they make like $300 million a year off of that dumb thing.
Right.
What if they'd have given him a piece of the pie that was commensurate with his invention? What would that have said to everybody else at 3M? Oh man, I better turn my brain on. I'm going to go after this. So the participation age is about those two things. And most companies make the mistake today of wanting people to participate without wanting to share with them. This fancy word called engagement. You hear it thrown around all the time. Engagement is not a practice. It's not a thing it's a result of culture and the way you treat people. It's not a thing you invent and try and create. But we got engagement people out there all over the business landscape, having you spend tens of millions of dollars on trying to get people to engage more, when all you have to do is make decision making a localized thing. That's it. And we can talk about that next. But that's the key practice of the participation age: distributed decision making.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's basically where we're heading, right, in terms of the work environment from, I guess we're pivoting out of the information age, from the industrial age, information age, into the participation age. Is that,
I think we already were in it. We were probably starting to come into it at the end of the official industrial age, but people called it the technology age and the information age. I think we were already getting there because the millennials are the first cohort group that actually did not have to worry about their next meal in the history of man. That's a very unique thing. So they did not go to work to make money because they know that they could be, there's lots of ways they could get this figured out, from the state taking care of them to hundreds of others. They don't go to work to make money. They go to work to make meaning. And that's a new thing. My mom taught me to go to work to make money. You don't go to work to make friends or to do things you love. You go there to get as much money as you can and get the heck out so that you can make meaning somewhere else. I think as millennials started to get born in the 80s and started to get into the workplace in the mid 90s, that's when this thing began to switch, because they weren't going to put up with a job. A job pays the bills. They wanted work. They wanted meaningful, integrated work that was a part of who they were, so that when they went to work, they took the whole human being with them. They didn't leave part of themselves in the car.
Right. So let me ask you this. You brought up millennials and we've got Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, all these young people that are now entering the workforce. Yep. And I know from working with a lot of clients, entrepreneurs, business owners, there's this tendency that, we constantly hear the conversation or the complaint that they don't want to work. They just want a paycheck. They just want to show up, What is your response to that? How would you respond to a client that basically uses that line on you?
Yeah, it's generational BS. My parents thought the Beatles would make my life, would send me straight to hell. And Leave It to Beaver was considered satanic TV by Christian networks, and now the Christian networks are the only ones that have it, on their networks. I mean, generationally, we always think the next generation has gone to hell in a handbag. And certainly the way we baby boomers look at millennials, we say, well, we say they don't want to work, but what we really are observing is they don't work the way we do. And we don't like that. Because see, we go to work to make money. Get down, be task-oriented. We're very transactional about the way we do work. Not interested. They don't need it. They know that they don't have to do that to survive. First generation in the history of man. They go to work to make meaning. And so time is the new money, and meaning is the new money, and relationships. And is this going to be a great place to work? Well, I actually have an impact here. Can I do something that's worth doing? That's the hallmark of work. So we look at millennials and say they don't want to work. What we really say is they don't want a job, and they don't, and we shouldn't give them a job, because a job is dehumanizing. A job is putting a nail in the left boot and passing it to the guy beside you to put a nail in the right boot, where there's no brain involved. There's no localized decision making. What's the one thing that makes us human, or makes us adults? The one thing that makes us adult over children, I've studied this, is a fancy thing called agency of responsibility. I don't like big words. Well, the real thing here is that I get to make decisions. Children don't get to make decisions, and I do. I still remember going to college and putting the ice cream in my freezer for the first time, and closing the freezer. I stopped in mid-close, and I opened it again. I smiled and I said, I can eat this anytime I want. There's no mom to tell me I can't. And as I closed it, I stopped and froze again. I said, oh no, I can eat this anytime I want. Now I'm responsible. But that's what makes us adults, is the ability to make decisions. What's the one thing we don't allow most people at work to make? If you have managers, it's making decisions. That's why I opened with managers tell. Managers sit in their ivory covered mahogany offices, and they come up with great processes and great this and great that, and they come out of their office and they pontificate for 45 minutes and hand us the process and go back into their office, and we're stuck with whatever they came up with. They tell. And I am immediately dehumanized, because what you could have done instead was come out of your office and say, what result do you think we should get? Yeah, let's work together to get that. I agree with that. What process do you think would get us that result? Let's work together to figure that out. And all of a sudden, I'm part of this, and I'm actually engaged. Really simple. Input equals ownership. Why is engagement at 30% year after year? It's because people have no ownership. Give them ownership, and they have no input. Give them input, and they'll take ownership. So millennials, that is BS. I'm calling BS on that whole thing that millennials don't want to work. We have millennials working for us, and we have to call them off the dogs. They work way too hard sometimes. But they're working because they're making meaning, and they get to make decisions. Not in a vacuum, but they get to make decisions.
Yeah, no, I love that. Let me ask you this. So if someone's thinking, they're listening to this and they're thinking, it sounds good, but you don't understand, Chuck, we make widgets, or, we do something that's very boring. How is it that we're going to be able to allow people to find meaning in that work? How do we do that?
So Ricardo Semler built a company in the 1980s called Semco. He rebuilt it. His father built it. It was 30 years old. It started out being something like a washing machine factory. And after 30 years, it was a $4 million factory. Think of that. That is not good growth after 30 years. You're barely surviving. Yeah. It's now a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And the way he did that was, when he took over, he got everybody together and said, I'm no longer going to make decisions. I'm no longer your boss. We're going to be mission-oriented. And here's how this thing's going to work. And we make widgets. And so I'm going to depend on you to figure out better processes. We're going to pay you incentives, not bonuses. We're going to give you results-based work. It's one of the tectonic shifts from industrial age work to participation age work, is you move away from time-based pay to results-based pay. So he took away large salaries, hourly wages, and things like that. And he paid people per washing machine. And he stopped the assembly lines. He took those apart, and he put people in pods of 10 or 12 or 15 people that had all the parts around each pod, and they all made a washing machine from scratch, set it aside, and then the team would make another washing machine. They make better washing machines faster, with higher productivity and higher profit than anybody else in South America. Henry Ford was wrong. The assembly line is not the most efficient way to do business. The most efficient way is give everybody their brain back. And they get paid per washing machine. So if pod A makes 10 washing machines in a week, they get paid X, and pod B makes 6 washing machines, they get paid X minus 4. And the first thing they do is they run over to pod A and say, how'd you do that? And now we're learning together. And then they get to where they're making 12 and pod A is making 10, and they run over there. And so you give people their brains back and watch them be adults. This guy founded this company on 2 principles, and the first one was trust in adult behavior. What an incredibly audacious thing to do, to believe that people would not be stupid and lazy, they'd actually be smart and motivated if you just let them.
Yeah, one of the things I'm picking up on, Chuck, that you're talking about when you give this story about making washing machines is transparency, right? Yes. So there's transparency between the teams. There's transparency from the top down, from sides, from all directions, transparency. Why does that matter? And what role does transparency play? And how do we get transparency?
So if you give me a bonus at the end of the year because we made money, I have no understanding of what part I played in getting that bonus. There's no transparency to that. If you give me a weekly incentive to make 10 washing machines and I make 10, I know exactly this for that, quid pro quo. If I make these many washing machines, I get that. And if I act this way amongst my team members and they score me this way, I get this. So you have to change the relationship between the way that we used to incentivize people and the way we do today. The whole idea of time versus results becomes a really big deal. And transparency is huge in that. To your point, this same washing machine factory, in the first week anybody's there, they take like a 4 or 6 hour class on how to read a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, and what cash flow and profit mean. Because they're going to be incentivized to get those things to work. And all of the company's cash flow statements and profit and loss, all that stuff, you can go to any computer in the company. Not only can you see that stuff, but this is going to scare some people. If they didn't get there right away, they got there in a few years, but now they go to a computer. I can go to a computer if I work there, and I can see everybody's salary, including the CEO's. Everybody's complete compensation package. Yeah. That's transparency. And what he found was the more transparent he was, the more I got interested in helping him solve the problems. If you say to people, hey, we're not profitable this month, so you don't get a bonus, well, what do I do with that?
Right.
But if you say, well, here's your part, here's the whole profit and loss balance sheet, and you can see right here, we're really killing it. We're really upside down in expenses on equipment. Well, okay, that gives me something I can work with. So transparency it's never a bad thing. The more transparent you are, the more money you're going to make. That is a pretty much an axiom. It's just the opposite of what we were taught. But see, if you have a top-down pyramid scheme, you can't be transparent because people are going to get ticked off.
No, that'll definitely push you and stretch you for those that are, used to quote unquote traditional business and, the traditional way of thinking about business, particularly in smaller entrepreneurial companies. That can be a scary
It goes back to what we talked about right up front, Wayne, that people have to believe that the people around them are smart and motivated and can actually help them build this company with them, not for them. And when you adopt that and you invite those people in, now you have 100 brains instead of one.
Yeah. No, that is very powerful. As we wrap up, Chuck, I just want to ask you one final question, and that's in relation to what you talk about in your upcoming book, commitment letters. What are those? Why do they matter? And how do we go about creating those?
Sure. So people commit to what they create. And input equals ownership. And once we commit, let's say we put a process together, the 6 of us on a team, not in a vacuum. We have other teams look at it. We have leaders in the company look at it to make sure it works for the company. But we created the process. Once we do that, then we look at what incentives should be applied to that process. If it works, if it doesn't work, what are the incentives? What are the disincentives? And we agree on those together with the company. We get all that stuff wired out. And what's the implications if somebody continually on a regular basis doesn't play ball with us? When do we let them go? And we all agree on that I will be let go under these circumstances by my teammates. We put all that stuff together, and then we write a commitment letter to that process and say, here's our process, here's our metrics, here's our incentives, and here's our responsibilities and implications if we don't meet those responsibilities. We all sign it. I keep a copy, the team keeps a copy, and that becomes the way we manage ourselves. So that's self-management in a nutshell. There's a great company in California doing this, 400 regular full-time people, 4,000 part-time, and they run their whole business on commitment letters. We commit to each other that we're going to do X, and then we do what we're supposed to do. So if you don't do that, then there's implications for that. And the commitment letter basically can fire me. My team doesn't fire me. They just hold up the commitment letter and say, hey, you have not kept this for this many months. The commitment letter fires you. Or here's what you're getting incentivized. The commitment letter gives you even more. So it's a great way for us to come together. And there's real research and chemistry behind this. When you physically sign a document, your brain changes. And it creates community. And I think community is the next great conversation at work.
That's excellent. Well, Chuck, where can people go to learn more about you and to find out about your upcoming book and your previous books?
Yeah, chuckblakeman.com. We try and keep it simple for people. So just go to chuckblakeman.com and you'll see the books there. You'll see everything else we're doing there. The book comes out November 17th. We're going to be doing a pre-launch on that coming up, and it might even be on Amazon by the time this airs, but if not, it'll be up very shortly after that to pre-launch.
And Chuck, for those who may be interested in learning more about working with you and your organization, who are your ideal clients or who are your ideal customers that you like to work with, that you're a good fit to work with?
The ideal client is a company where either the founder is still in charge because they're willing to take risks to do things like this that will actually end up in a better place. CEOs, a lot of times, not always, but many times, they have taken on a maintenance role. Don't screw this up. This is going well. Don't screw it up. So I either need I need a founder, or I need a CEO who has the permission to move in a better direction and to see that there's no dip in this. It's not like you go back at all. You start going forward immediately. But we need people who believe, number one, that people are smart and motivated, and that they want to work in a world where hierarchy is something that is organic. Leaders have followers, managers have reports. I want to work with companies where they believe that let's do the scary thing. Let's find out who's actually following. Let's dismantle management, and let's see who gets followed, and those are our leaders. I want those people.
No, that's excellent. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule today to be with us.
Great to be with you, Wayne.
Thank you.